Before we get to this week's episode, this is just a reminder that if you sign up to my email list by going to go.nonmonogamyhelp.com/email, you do automatically get sent a coupon code that you can use for the Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy on the Jessica Kingsley Publishers website. And they do ship to North America and to Europe, as far as I know, also all around the world, but do feel free to join the email list and get that coupon in case you want to get the book, but you want to get a little bit of money off. All right, this is this week's episode.
Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Welcome to episode 99 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix, almost 100 episodes. That's kind of wild. Again, please send your questions to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and they'll either be answered in the podcast or the column anonymously, and you can let me know which one you prefer. Also, if you didn't already know this, you can go to nonmonogamyhelp.com/contact, and there's a little bit of information there on how to record your own question if you want to. I'm kind of branching out a little bit into that, so you can also record a question there. You can get everything else at nonmonogamyhelp.com. You can also subscribe to the newsletter by going to nonmonogamyhelp.com/email, and you can follow the column on Twitter and Instagram at nonmonogamyhelp.com. And it's me. I say the column, but it's sort of following me, but not really. Anyway, if you want to support what I'm doing, I really appreciate it. Please consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month helps support the daily running of the columns and the podcasts. And it also shows me just a general vote of support. I'm also really transparent about what comes from the podcast and column and the Patreon and everything. So it's an interesting thing to be a part of. You can do that by going to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. And if you donate $5 or more a month, your name, with your permission, will be read at the end of the podcast. All right, let's get to this week's discussion question. If this is the first time you're hearing an episode, every week before I get to the listener question, I will give us a little bit of a discussion question that we can use to get to know ourselves more, people that we love more, and I also answer it myself, and I attempt to keep it brief to give you just a little bit of context. This week's discussion question is, what is your anchor? And if you're unfamiliar with the columns or the podcasts or my book, The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy, you might not know what an anchor is, but an anchor is a concept that I've come up with, which is basically the reason why you're interested in being polyamorous or non-monogamous. And the reason I've come up with this is because for someone like myself who doesn't feel innately polyamorous or non-monogamous, it's really, really helpful to have something that you can refer back to when things get rough, to remember why you were interested in this in the first place, because there are definitely some times where you will feel like, what the hell am I doing and why? And if you're not innately non-monogamous or polyamorous, or don't feel you are, then it might be a lot harder for you to realize and have something to grab a hold of, basically. And your anchor can't be to save a monogamous relationship, because a polyamorous relationship is different, and your relationship will change inevitably if it's moving from monogamy to non-monogamy. I'd say my anchor is that I do have a little bit of an interest in developing more than one romantic relationship, although actually as time goes on, I am kind of going more towards being not particularly needing to be polyamorous or non-monogamous. Like, I can be monogamous if I want, and it's just kind of like, I'll see what life throws at me, basically, is how I feel about it. So yeah, that is the discussion question. What is your anchor? So if you haven't already discussed this, please definitely have a conversation with any partner you have. And also, there are a little bit more like active discussion questions and like prompts and exercises that you can get in The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy, which you can find at most bookstores. All right, let's get to this week's letter. My partner and I, both males, are in a long-distance open relationship where we are the only committed partner, but have the freedom for intimate exploration, from friendships to friends with benefits. However, I am grappling with feelings of insecurity and/or jealousy when my partner and an individual sex partner frequently meet in multiple and different contexts of their life. For example, my partner and his friend have almost daily communication, frequent the gym together where they are sometimes intimate, meet for sex, have similar careers, and sometimes see each other at work or plan to work together at home on nights when sex/intimacy does not occur. I'm really happy that my boyfriend is able to connect so well with someone else, but having just one person involved at so many levels of my partner's weekly life makes me feel uncomfortable, as we are in long distance and I have no way to connect at the same level with my boyfriend. I don't think I would feel uncomfortable if all these activities involve different people, as the amount of partners or frequency of seeing people is not an issue for me, as long as we have virtual quality time throughout the week. I wanted to hear your perspective on this, or whether you or anyone you know has dealt with similar feelings. Whether me feeling uncomfortable is valid and something that needs to be modified, or whether I should work on my end with my feelings without modifying their levels and frequency of interaction. Before we get to this week's answer, I'm going to quickly plug this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. I often tell people in the columns and the podcast that they should seek a therapist, and this isn't, a diss. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's very important, actually, and I think pretty much every single human being on the planet would benefit from some form of therapy at any point in their life. That's what I think. It doesn't have to be only for people who have gone through really intense things, so please consider seeing a therapist. It's definitely changed my life, and for a lot of people, seeing a therapist isn't something that's within their budget, or they can't find someone locally, or they're really struggling. BetterHelp allows you to find therapists online that you can send messages to at any time of the day, and they do offer some financial aid. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code Non-Monogamy Help at checkout, or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help. Let's get to this week's answer. Of course your feelings are valid. Of course they are. And I don't even know if this is fully jealousy or just the fact that long distance relationships are freaking hard. And if you had another frequent partner, it might be a little bit easier for you because you wouldn't necessarily be dwelling on it as much, but it makes total freaking sense that you would feel scared and sad about this. And I don't even think that it's about the person, and it seems like you have recognized that. You're saying it's not the frequency of the partners, it's the fact that this person gets to share so much of my partner's life. And that makes you sad, and that makes total and complete and utter sense. Of course you're sad about that. And I think that you should just allow yourself to feel a little sad and understand that that's not a bad thing. I mean, it is a bad thing to feel because it doesn't feel great, but it's very, very understandable for you to feel sad in this situation. So allow yourself to feel that. I think that what might be really helpful when it comes to this, a certain part of this is inevitable and kind of unavoidable, right? This is one of the reasons why some people really can't do long distance. Being apart from your partner sucks. And there isn't really anything that you can really do unless you win the lottery and can suddenly take a bunch of flights every week to see your partner. I'm not sure how far away your partner is, but there's a certain part of this that is kind of just completely unavoidable. That's just gonna suck. But I do think that some things, like you said, the virtual quality time you have is really important. It's really, really good that you have that. I also think that it might help, if you haven't already, to talk about how non-monogamy and polyamory fits within your lives together. Because it's very, very understandable for you to be also afraid, not just the fact that this person has the access to your partner that you very, very much wish you had. Totally makes sense. But it also makes sense to be a little bit afraid, because even if this person isn't trying to steal your partner away, and even if we don't think of it in that way, it's just an obvious thing that this person is getting to share so much and you aren't. And there's a certain aspect of that is going to make you afraid. And that makes total sense. So I think another thing that would help with this is if you actually talk to each other about how non-monogamy or polyamory fits within your life. What are your plans together for the future? Do you have plans together? Are you going to transition from being in a long-distance relationship into moving in together? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Maybe you can think about that. That can be your anchor in a way when dealing with some of these unavoidable, very hard and difficult and sad things to feel. If you have those kinds of plans, that can really help you and make you feel a little bit calmer when it comes to just the fact that this person is able to share so much time with your partner. And there's also a practical aspect of, is this person aware that, yeah, they may have all of this time with your partner now, but if you do plan on moving in together, that's going to change. And it's kind of important that that discussion be had in some kind of way. I mean, maybe this other person is just enjoying what they have right now and isn't necessarily expecting that to continue. But there is kind of a understandable anxiety there of the fact that, like, hey, you're sitting in my seat. When I come back, I'm going to need that seat. That's a really shitty way of putting it. But there's a very understandable feeling there of this person is kind of in your role in the way you want to be with your partner. And that is a role that will hopefully at some point be occupied by you. So you just need to have a discussion about that with your partner and see if your partner's speaking to somebody else. I mean, even if we put labels on things, and even if we supposedly have this kind of hierarchy, right, where you are considered the anchor partner and this other person isn't, or however you want to put it, whenever the actions don't necessarily match up to that label, it's going to make sense for you to have a little bit of anxiety about it without it necessarily being anything that is personal towards this person, because it's not personal. I think it doesn't matter who the person in this situation would be. And as you again pointed out before, it could be multiple people, wouldn't bother you. But it's not necessarily about the person. It's this very real, very understandable sadness that you have that this person is able to access your partner in a way that you can't. And I think that part of that, again, can't be remedied because that's just the way that long distance sometimes is, but part of it can. I think that you also might want to think about, are there other ways that you and your partner can work on reassurance with one another, right? Because I think that there's a little bit of a balance here. You don't want to modify, and I don't think you should try to modify your partner's behavior or how frequently they meet up, but there might be things that you can do to make things a little bit easier for you. What I am suggesting is not a kind of don't ask, don't tell thing. But I do wonder how it is all of this information. Maybe it's that your partner is just kind of sharing like, oh, I met up with so-and-so and we did such and such. The general day-to-day things going on in his life, which is fine. But there might be some benefit to considering how much detail to pass on to you and whether or not that detail is helpful. And this isn't about lying, and this isn't about, hiding things, but sometimes I just feel like that this person exists and that this person spends a lot of time with your partner. And I wonder what the benefit is of you being constantly reminded of that. And if there's not maybe a better way of figuring out things to talk about with one another that don't circle around you being constantly reminded that there's this other person who they're spending a lot of time with. And again, not about lying, not about pretending like this person doesn't exist, because you do know they exist. But it doesn't have to be so frequent that you're reminded of this. So maybe that might be something that you can all work on. Like when you do have your virtual meetups, maybe, instead of talking about what he's done with such and such, maybe he can talk about, specific things at work, or you can start a book club together or watch something together that you can talk about. Again, I don't want, it's a very thin line perhaps between like don't ask, don't tell and like lying, because I'm not saying that he should lie or feel like he has to hide that he's with another person. But because I don't know what conversations are going on in between you two, and because I don't know the level of detail that you're constantly being exposed to, I do know that sometimes people, when they do open their relationships or they start off in non-monogamous relationships for the first time, feel like they need to tell their partner a lot of detail about what's going on with them and other people because they're afraid of being accused of cheating. And so the way that they deal with the anxiety about being accused of cheating or somehow cheating by mistake is by giving their partner a lot of detail. And sometimes people think when they go into non-monogamy that the best way to deal with their anxiety about their partner dating someone else is to see all the detail. And that isn't as necessary as people might think it is. And it's not lying to, in the same way that, I don't know, it's hard to compare it to friendships in a monogamous relationship because there isn't really an exact comparison there. But, it doesn't have to be so detailed if it is. So let's think about how you're having introductions to this information, how we can limit your access to the information, but not in a way that encourages deceit. And think about why it is your partner's sharing what he's sharing and what he's trying to get out of that. And if there's something else that you might be able to talk about, or if there's a way you can ask for reassurance after, you're told some of this information. I think there's a little bit of leeway there to work through a balance between you knowing what's happening, because obviously you don't want to be lied to, but you not necessarily needing to know every single detail. Because I feel like even in my relationships, there's a reason to disclose to my partner if I have like a partner who I live with or want to live with, or who is a long-term partner, and I sleep with someone else. There is a reason for sexual health to disclose that I've slept with someone else, right? However, I wouldn't necessarily feel like I needed to tell them that I slept with someone else in the gym, or that once I've slept with someone, I wouldn't feel the need to tell them about every time I've slept with that person. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like once they know, okay, I'm sleeping with this person, there's a sexual health thing there, we can negotiate that, but this is, I'm letting you know that this is happening. I wouldn't feel the need to be like, yeah, we went to the gym and had sex. Like, I don't feel the need to tell them. There are some people who have relationships where, they enjoy hearing about that. That doesn't seem like the case here. Maybe it's kind of a mixture of how you feel. But again, like, let's just think about like how we can have discussions about this without you needing to know details. Because I kind of feel like you know a lot of details that aren't really that necessary for you to know. And there are things that your partner can, if you were having a long distance monogamous relationship and your partner, let's say, went out with a bunch of friends and went to let's say your partner went to the theme park, and the theme park is like your favorite thing to do. And maybe your partner wanted to say like, oh yeah, I went to the theme park with so-and-so. That's fine that your partner's telling you about their day, but maybe they don't go into detail like, yeah, we ride this ride and we did this and we got cotton candy and like, because they know that this is something you really love and they know it would hurt you and make you feel sad to miss out on that with you. They can tell you and not go into a huge amount of detail, not for the purposes of hiding things, but for the purposes of understanding that you're going to feel a little sad. And it's not, it doesn't have to be about someone hiding something or not being able to share something with you. So yeah, there's a little bit of a balance there. But overall, I would say, to sum up, of course you're sad. Of course you feel this way. Please allow yourself to have these feelings. Maybe consider getting a therapist to talk through some of these things, because there is an inevitable part of this that is just long distance that is really hard. It's very, very difficult. And maybe you can join groups of people in long distance relationships or seek out friends who are in long distance relationships. Even if your friends are monogamous, you still might be able to share some of that. Oh, I'm sad that I'm missing out on my partner's life because we're not reachable with each other. You can still have someone who understands what you're going through, even if they don't necessarily understand the whole aspect of like someone else gets to have fun with my partner, which they might feel like would be horrible, but for you, it is manageable. It's just about, at least on the first step, accepting that you feel like shit and that that's fine and that that's very understandable. And even if you were monogamous, I still think you would have a hard time with, like the example that I gave of maybe your partner going to a theme park and you loving theme parks. You would still struggle. It would just be with different things. The second thing that is like, just keep reminding yourself that it's not about this specific person. And I think you kind of already know that. And then also have a conversation with your partner about where non-monogamy or polyamory fits within both of your lives. What are your plans for the future? Has your partner talked to this other person about the fact that maybe this person has a lot of their timeshare right now, but won't have a lot of their time in the future? And maybe that will make you feel a little bit more settled. Think about your anchor. What is the reason why you're interested in non-monogamy? And how can you bring it back? Both like the anchor within your long-term relationship of the promise of getting back together and physical proximity is a big anchor, but also your overall anchor of what you're interested in non-monogamy and why you're interested in it. Also, really think about how you can negotiate both reassurance with your partner, because I think that your partner, even if it's not necessarily his fault, that he's found someone who he can have all this fun with and you don't necessarily have that. And it's not that you want him to change his behavior and not meet up with this person as frequently, but I think that he could be a little bit more reassuring, or maybe feel an understandable kind of, if he shares stuff, to also give you kind of reassurance a little bit more. Or like, can you work on an agreement where, you have a code word even to say like, I'm feeling a little sad, feeling like I'm missing out. And then last but not least, again, this is not about lying. This is not moving to a don't ask, don't tell type of setup, but can you work on a balance between how much you know about this other relationship and how much you don't know? Because part of me feels like you know a lot more detail than is necessary for you to know. And it might benefit you to trust each other. You know about this person. Nobody's cheating, if that's a fear or a reason why you know so much detail. And have a little bit more of a balance there. And maybe think about other like ways you can have quality time together, things you can talk about that don't involve necessarily him going into detail about the things he's doing with this other person, because it's really not necessary. And if you trust each other on a basic level, then it's just not necessary for you to know all of this, because it doesn't do you any good. And not knowing it wouldn't threaten you in any way, as long as, you have your sexual health agreements and things like that. So yeah, I hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to episode 99 of Non-Monogamy Help. This is amazing. I don't even know what to say. Almost 100 episodes. It's really wild. If you want to be awesome, you can donate to my Patreon. Donating $5 or more means that your name, with your permission, will be read at the end of the podcast. This is also fully optional as well. You can give $5 or more a month without having a podcast shout out. It's an optional thing. So yeah, this week's current patrons are Laura Boylan, Chris Albury Jones, Juke, Ellen Robertson, Nikki Jones, James Wartell, Leo Yaki, and Tyler Tigno. If for whatever reason you can't be a patron, because I understand not everybody has the expendable income, and that's fine, if you can take 5 minutes, log into iTunes, find the podcast, rate and review it, that would be really, really help blah, blah, blah. That would help me. It's 98 episodes and I'm still struggling with saying this, but that's fine. Don't worry about it. You can also rate it on Spotify. So yeah, if you have 5 minutes to spare, I'd really appreciate that. It would mean so much. And if you do a review, please let me know on Twitter or Instagram at Non-Monogamy Help. That would be really, really great. All right, that's all for this week. You'll get a new column next Friday and the 100th episode in a fortnight. And maybe I'll do something special. Maybe I won't. Who knows? But stay tuned. All right, thanks for listening.
You've
You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albury-Jones at albury-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.